Welcome, everybody, to my April video newsletter. I hope you've had a good month and you're having a good start to April. Today, I wanted to talk about depression. This has been something that I've lived with for over half of my life, and it's something that I know a lot of other people are struggling with too, especially over the last year with COVID and everything that's going on in our world. And I also want to talk about how mindfulness and some of the meditation practices can be supportive in working with depression. So, to start, I wanted to share a little bit about my story and my road with, or my journey, I guess, with depression. I guess my first bout of depression was after I missed the 1996 Olympic team. Um, it started around 1997. And I didn't really know what was going on. I was 17 years old. All I knew was that I didn't really want to go to the gym anymore. I had trained for 12 years, 14 years at that point to make it to the Olympics, and then I missed it by one spot. So I was the alternate in 96. And at 17 years old, I was just kind of lethargic and found myself going into the gym with headphones on, not wanting to listen to my coaches, and I was crying all the time, and I didn't really know what was going on. But as I look back, it was my first experience with depression. So there was no awareness around it. And it came and it went, and it kind of morphed, actually. It morphed into throwing myself into losing weight and getting fit, because after the Olympics, I had put on a little bit of weight. And so I developed more of disordered eating and would do more of like a binge purge pattern. And I was over exercising and doing training that probably wasn't very conducive to high level gymnastics, because I was doing more endurance training and it requires more quick twitch type muscle activation. And so that, I think I just threw myself into that, and the depression seemed to lift. Even though I wasn't fully happy, I at least had something that I felt like I was working towards. And then I went off to college. I went to the University of Utah, which I have their sweatshirt on today because they are competing for a spot on the for NCAA Nationals today. So I'm trying to cheer them on. Side note. So anyways, I was accepted to the University of Utah. I got a full ride collegiate scholarship to compete there. And my first year there was very good, very successful. I was 19 years old and I won the NCAA all-around title and beam title, and I felt like I was on top of the world. And then the next year, I felt the pressure. I felt the burden of living up to that expectation. And so I kind of clung to the food again, exercising and not letting my body rest, and started losing more weight. And so I was kind of in a weakened state as we started the season, even though I was trying to build my strength. I tore my ACL 3 meets into the season. This was actually the second time I had experienced that injury. And I immediately felt depressed. I felt the loss. I knew what it was like to go through the surgery and the months and months of rehabilitation, and didn't really know what that meant for my gymnastics career. So I experienced another bout of depression with that. And even though I did recover and I was able to train the next year and compete on bars and beam, that year, when I was 21, I was suicidal. And it's hard to say that, but that's the truth. And sometimes when we get so depressed and so sad, we don't want to live anymore. And that's definitely what happened in my situation. I remember my 21st birthday, just bawling my eyes out on my bed, not knowing what I was going to do. And so I worked through it. I somehow got through it and ended up winning NCAAs on balance beam that year. But it was a rough year. And then the following year, things were a little bit better. But then my last year of collegiate gymnastics, which was 2003, I was 23 years old. The depression came back, and it came back with a vengeance again, along with the disordered eating and the burnout on every level. And I remember being at a practice one day just thinking, I'm going to go home and I'm going to end it. And I mean, even as I speak this, I get emotional because this has been a pattern, and it's deep suffering. And so, things got better. Well, actually, they got worse when I graduated from college. I had a couple years of just continued intense depression and tried antidepressants, but I never felt good on them. And then I started working with these mindfulness practices, and I learned something called the body scan. And the body scan is just when you lay down and you pay attention to what your body is telling you. And I had never known how to do that without immense amount of judgment and criticism. And just the emotions are coming today. But I want to share this honestly because it's a struggle that I know I'm not alone in, and that there are tools that we can develop and cultivate to work with it. And so the body scan became very supportive. It became helpful, and then that grew. So that basic mindfulness practice, as I learned more about meditation and how to be with experiences in my body and my mind. I created a little bit more space for the depression, for the anxiety, for the disordered eating, the persistent need to achieve and be perfect. And so I ended up becoming a physician's assistant. I'm trying to make this story a little shorter than it is, but I ended up about 6 years ago, after having my son Mason, I ended up getting very, very ill, and I still don't fully know what it is, but I think it was basically just utter burnout, and every part of my body crashed. My nervous system, my muscles, my hormones, everything just fell apart. And so it's been a 6-year journey of basically just trying to survive each day and finding a way to get through the day, finding a way to look for some goodness, to look for improvement in my health, or at least acceptance around the issue. And the depression has been a companion the entire time. So there have been so many times where I just didn't want to make it through the day because of the intensity of the suffering in my body. And all along, these mindfulness practices, and the one practice in particular called loving kindness, which is cultivating love and compassion for ourselves, which sometimes we hear that and we think, well, that's just foo-foo or woo-woo, and it doesn't do anything. That's for weaklings. And really, it's for the strong of heart to be able to offer ourselves compassion and care when we're deeply suffering. And what sparked my desire to talk about this today was that yesterday I was talking with a hypnotherapist. I'm still trying to seek answers, still trying to figure out ways to get better, because I want to feel well. I want to be able to function outside of the home and be a healthy mom. But anyways, yesterday I was doing an initial evaluation with a hypnotherapist, and all along I just sensed within me, like, this just doesn't feel right. Some of the things that he was saying didn't feel right. And at one point he was talking about depression and how you can wake up feeling depressed, but then you can shut it down. And he was saying it with the intention of something being positive. But what came up in me was aggression and violence. It felt very violent to say, I'm going to shut down this depression. Because all of a sudden, I was able to sense into this intelligence that is within depression. That it's deeply saddening. It can feel very heavy. It makes us not want to live sometimes. And yet there is this vulnerability and this, I think, sacredness within it, that there's something that it's trying to teach us if we can just listen to it. And for some of us, it might be a companion for life. So how do we befriend it? And it's not to say that if we are deeply struggling and are wanting to end our lives, we need each other. We need the support of each other. Sometimes we can have all the tools in the world and we need to reach out and we need to talk about it and we need to get help. So I wanted to just share my story today. And, the emotions are coming up around it because it's a deep issue. And as I was writing about it yesterday, I was writing a little bit about what came up for me with that. As soon as I heard the word shut it down, it was like, that just sounds so violent. It sounds so like this depression is trying to teach me something. It's trying to soften me in some ways and open me to the suffering of the world, beyond my own suffering, and trying to teach me compassion, trying to teach me gentleness and acceptance of sadness. And so as I was writing about it, like the vision that came in my mind was like depression is this very delicate, tiny little flower that's just blooming up all alone in the middle of a barren sidewalk, And if you just walk by and stomp on it, it's so violent and aggressive, and we don't see the beauty in that tiny, lonely little flower. And yet, if we can see it more clearly, then I think we have ways to work with it more skillfully, that we don't have to shut it down. We don't have to be aggressive towards our sadness. And I can say this with a little bit more clarity today. Maybe a couple weeks ago when I was in the throes of depression, it would have been harder. But what happens, I think, is as we get through it, as we get through our deep darkness, and we fall on other people, we use them for our support, we use all of our tools, we get through it. What I found is oftentimes on the other side, there is a little bit more light. There's a light that we're able to see because it was dark. If we didn't have that darkness, the light wouldn't be visible. And so, again, I don't want to underplay or downplay depression at all, because I know it's deep suffering. And yet I think if we can shift our relationship with it and not say that it's something that immediately has to be pushed down or pushed away, and we can actually open to it with the help of each other, with the help of compassionate support and maybe medications. We need to use all of the support and tools that we have. But in shifting our relationship with it, I think it's possible to open to a newfound freedom and maybe a lightness that we wouldn't have been able to experience had we not actually experienced the depression. So if you are one of those struggling with depression, I would love to be a support for you. What I oftentimes do in working with things like depression and anxiety is we do a one-on-one mindfulness session. And this is a practice that I've done within my own body so many times. And now I'm working more one-on-one with people, that we basically do a meditation together, and you're able to turn towards the sensations in your body. You're actually able to feel the emotions that are coming up very gently. We don't want to overwhelm ourselves. But sometimes being able to feel into your experience in the presence of somebody else, it can be healing, and it can allow things to come up that would be surprising, that can actually lead to more freedom and, like I said, healing. So thank you for listening, and I hope that you have a wonderful month, and never hesitate to reach out to me through my website, through Facebook, email. We're all in this together, and I hope to support you in any way that I can on your journey.